screen?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Let's see. Still see it?
Yes.
Awesome, perfect. All right, navigating new world. So let's go ahead and set the stage here. Would you agree that consumers have a fear right now? Are we all in agreement that consumers, buyers, maybe sellers, there's some type of fear?
Well, I think they always did, and some of them,
Yeah.
they have no idea about this. They're like,
Right.
"What? I'm lawsuit?" So
Yeah,
those might be
But-
a trickier conversation.
yeah, very much. I just talked to a seller that we're going to list here yesterday, and they had no clue. And as I went through it, I had to explain everything 100%. So here's the thing. I love this picture. This is my sleazy salesman dude, right? So there has always been and always will be a fear of salespeople, hands down, right? And right now, because of the fact that buyers actually have to enter into an agreement and a contract, it's even a stronger fear, right? The fear of being sold and making wrong decisions. So what I've always experienced in my career is when you think of salespeople, what do you think of just to describe them? Honest,
Somebody who's knowledgeable of the
good
product.
faith, right? Knowledgeable, yeah. But people always have that mindset, and one of the biggest things, fears that people have is being sold. So we have to, what I've talked about, what I'm coaching the team to, is it's even more important that we show up as professionals. I call it the 3 C's. So number one, we have to be clear. Number two, we have to be concise. And number three, we have to be confident in the things that we're saying. Because who's ever gone to a doctor and they're like, I don't know, well, what do you think we should do? Has anybody ever done that? Has anybody done? What would you do if you went to a doctor and they said that, right? It wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good. So we have to show up much differently. And so I'm just going to run through these 3 C's and how we're working on them. So first and foremost, I think it starts with the understanding of the agreements, right? Ask yourself, are you able to explain the agreements to someone who has no idea about real estate? Are you able to explain, even though they may not understand, can you explain the agreements to your teenage kid? Can you explain it to your son or daughter? And if the answer to that's no, I would highly recommend to first start with really understanding the listing agreement, really understanding the buyer broker agreement, understanding the SPBB, how that works, and understanding all the new forms that have come out. My thing is, whenever a new partner comes on with our team, we have them go through it, we have them read it. You should probably read it 10 times at least, understanding. And here is and one thing that I find is a lot of the questions that I get asked quite a bit is my first thing back to somebody who asked the question is, what's it say in the agreements, right? Because 98% of the time it's in the agreements or it's in the paperwork. Who's been studying these? Anybody?
Hopefully everybody.
Hopefully
Right.
everybody, right? Hopefully we understand, we know. Perfect. The next thing is concise. So when you are explaining these, having the understanding of the agreements as well as the being confident in the conversations you're going to have, which are coming up next, what happens is being able to explain it concisely, right? If you're filling your words, your sentences with ums and thinking through it. I actually did a script practice today on what we're going to cover here in a second. And we were trying to make it up as we were going through, and guess what happened? Maybe I have any ideas?
You were saying and
You're saying and it didn't come out as confident, right? At the end of the day, it didn't come out as confident. Let me ask you this. Are you going to work with someone who's unconfident about what they're talking about? The answer is no, right? Answer's no. So making sure that you're being straightforward. So confident, we need to know what to say. So let's jump into that. So the first thing is, number one, do not use the word lawsuit or we were sued. Does that make sense? Why don't we use that?
Yes,
Why not?
because
Put
they're
the
gonna
bad-
panic. They'll be scared.
Bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah. They're like, why were you guys sued? And then it starts them thinking like, should I trust this guy? Right?
Mhm.
But you should be very surprised at how many people were, hey, there was a lawsuit that recently happened, NAR sued, got sued along with all, right? And we start going into that sued lawsuit. So here's what we've been using, and we'll go through this. So for a seller, Michelle, you probably heard, as it's been in the news for a while, that there was a lot of discussion and conversation around how buyer agent commissions were getting paid through the multiple listing services across the country. And then I asked, because I want to know what they've heard. So I'll ask them, hey, what have you heard about it? Right? There was some concern that if buyer doesn't know what their agent is getting paid, is that a fair opportunity for them to negotiate their best purchase price and situation in the deal? So now the NAR rule changes say that it is no longer to be hidden. It must be transparent, and buyers must agree up front on how they're going to compensate their agent. Here's the next sentence. You as a seller, nothing much has changed, right? I like to say to them, hey, there's not a whole lot changing here, but you pay the listing agent and you decide what, if anything, you're willing to pay the buyer. Questions on this first slide?
Well, buyer agent, right at the end of the sentence there, no?
What's up?
I think you left off the word agent at the end of the sentence.
Well, yeah, you could, I put it there because technically they pay the buyer, but yes, buyer agent. Yeah, you could definitely put that in there. Any questions about the content on this?
No.
Okay. So,
But sorry, but you're still suggesting that if they want to sell it quickly and for a better price, that they pay the buyer's agent, or you're not bringing that up yet?
we'll jump into that one next here. Yeah.
All right, for sure.
Yeah. So here are your options, and I'm just super clear with them. You can choose only to pay me, your listing agent, and leave it up to the buyer to compensate their agent. Now, while that sounds great, studies show that 87% of buyers will work with an agent. I think you and I could probably agree that a good portion of them won't have enough funds to pay their own agent, provide the down payment, and pay closing costs. So that may, we're not saying it is, that may eliminate a large portion of the buyer pool. The other thing to be aware of is, even if we say nothing about our willingness to give concessions of any sort, it won't stop them from submitting a request with the offer. Any buyer who chooses can submit that as part of the negotiation via SPBB. Questions here? No?
No.
All right, cool. Option two is that we can be split potentially. Depending on the price and the buyer situation, we might end up in a situation where you pay a portion and they pay a portion. Finally, the last option is you agree to pay the fee or to give this concession because you want to open it up to as many buyers in the marketplace as possible. Now, with this conversation with the seller, it's very straightforward, really, at the end of the day. You know, I was in the team meeting and I started hearing different ways people were explaining it and things. Again, it has to be clear, concise, and you got to be confident what you're saying. This really makes it very simple. It makes it very straightforward for the seller to understand. And it's just essentially, here are your options. What would you like to do? Usually I'll end it with, we can also, with the, once we go to market, if someone calls with your permission, I'll just let them know that, hey, we're willing to consider offers with concessions, right? Any questions on this?
Well, Jacob, I think, you're not being straightforward by, not using the word lawsuit. I think if you're straightforward, you'd open the conversation with something like, might have heard in the news that there was a big loss. And let me tell you what it resulted in. Otherwise, it seemed to me that you're evading by doing that. And if I was a consumer, I go, well, wait a second, I thought you were sued.
Mhm.
So that's how I would open the conversation.
Uh,
Discussion in the news, it's not, that seems amazing to me saying, right, is that what the word you used?
well, here's the deal. And who am I speaking with? Who was it that was commenting there?
Patrick,
Patrick. Here's the situation. They've seen it in the news. They knew it was a lawsuit. Am I being dishonest about it being a lawsuit? I'm just not talking about it. Why would I personally bring up a situation where well, we were sued? You can choose to do it however you feel is best for you, 100%. And again, these are ones that we worked up. We worked with our coaches and people in our organization to come up with. So 100%, if you feel that that's the best way, all day long, share it that way. I have I mean, but at the end of the day, if they've seen it, they know it was a lawsuit. It's not like I'm being dishonest. It's a situation where I'm just choosing not to mention it. What's that?
not saying dishonest, but use your analogy of the doctor, doctor should warn you of any complications, right? Your surgery or whatever you're seeing your doctor for. So,
Mhm.
If there's something ugly, let's bring it right up and then smack it right down. That would be the way I do it.
Yeah, 100%. And these are just, I mean, again, these are suggestions. These are what we're using, what we're finding works for our team. So if you 100% don't agree, I mean, I get it. And 100% use your
Agreement, Jacob. I just, maybe 15%.
Hey man, switch it up. Again, these are not set in stone, but they're good conversations to be had. Right? Cool. Any questions on that seller one? Any other questions? Sorry, my slides went away. No? All right. Here's the buyer side that we've been using. I hope everyone does some type of buyer presentation, right? To show the value that you provide for the buy side of things, so that, one of our presentations we use for the buy side is one where we go through everything that we're going to do. We do a lot of things differently than some I've seen out there. But once you end that, Mr. Buyer, now that you understand how we would work together and the home search services and value that I provide, the last piece we need to discuss is my compensation. For the services that I provide, the compensation I charge is X. So you insert your number there, and there are options around that compensation. So option number one, we submit a request for the seller to pay it. It's a form that we will submit with the offer called the SPBB. And then I would go into explaining the SPBB. Option number two, we split the compensation. You cover a portion and the seller covers a portion of the compensation. Number three, they won't pay for compensation, yet the deal is so good and you love the house so much that you choose to pay the compensation yourself. So we give them the three options. Now, obviously we have, I can't afford it, right? And we go into, those are your three options. You don't have to choose today necessarily, because we're going to negotiate as part of your offer, unless you prefer to just pay the compensation directly and keep the negotiation with the seller clean and simple. That's up to you. So what happens if they say I can't afford it, right? The first thing we could do is to take a look at the value of the property and the likelihood of a slightly higher appraisal. If we feel confident that could happen, we could add that difference in and go back to the seller at a little bit higher price and basically finance the difference. If that doesn't work, then you either have to pass on the home or you have to find a way to come up with the funds, maybe a loan, borrow from family, etc. And finally, Patrick, I'm a reasonable business person. So if there's a small gap and no other way to meet the gap, I don't want you to lose the house. I'm reasonable. We can talk about that should that come up. That's what we've been using. That's been working effectively. And I could share these if you guys want these.
Yes, please.
Yes,
If you wanted to
Yep.
speak up,
Yes, please.
Yes,
So I
please.
know we're gonna have some questions on that buyer one. So who has questions for me? Questions on it?
questions or comments, you guys. This is the time that you should be masterminding with each other, because you guys are all in it day to day.
Here's a couple things, and there's a, go ahead. Debbie.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Your name came up.
Sorry, I think that was me. I'm just curious, this is a great start, by the way. I think that was something I was struggling with
Sure.
was how do I simplify this and talk about it in a way that doesn't make it seem more confusing?
Yeah, that's what I was doing too before and our partners were doing. So I had to come up with
Right.
something
Yeah, this
that
is
we
great.
could work through.
I'm wondering, would you leave out listing the forms? Because would you maybe leave that out and then just get to the forms depending on what choice they made?
I would go through them. I think a big piece of that, at least from what I've done, and I have the SPB printed either way,
Uh-huh. Well,
because
yeah.
when you go through the SPB, it shows the buyer that, hey, this is what we can submit with our offers if they can't afford it, right?
Right.
And I just go through and explain it. It creates a comfort, like, hey, there is an option, because not everyone has money to pay their agent, right? I mean, a lot of people don't. On the flip side of that, with the seller, I like to show them, hey, this is probably what's going to come in more than likely. And if you're open to concessions, at the end of the day, it just comes down to your net value or your net proceeds, and that's what we're working to maximize, right? So if you get a great offer where they're asking for this and the net makes sense, then that's something you want to look at, right? Yeah, okay, great. Let me just share with you what it'll look like. And I just go a quick once over with them.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah. So that they're like not, I like me
So they don't
personally.
seem too overwhelmed.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And me personally, I actually spend about an hour and a half on every buyer consultation. And probably 30 to 45 minutes of that, I actually go through the offer, how to make their offer stronger, how to stand out versus the competition, what we're going to be negotiating up front. And now that this is part of it, I go through that as well.
So it seems to me that, some buyers are gonna think, oh, well, it costs me more now to buy a house because I now have to pay the commission on top of the purchase price. Where they always, in the past, have paid the commission, just came out of the purchase price, you know, the bitching and moaning about, oh, the seller hasn't paid the commission, the seller never paid for anything. All the money came from the buyer. So it's really just changing the flow chart. Nothing has changed. Not a single thing.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
I think somehow putting that in here, you know, because your options all show that, okay, we gotta come up with more money. No, it's the same money. House before this change is the same, you know, same price.
And Pat,
I think that we don't
these-
want to overwhelm our clients either, though. So I think just sticking
Mhm.
to the facts is really the best, you know, the facts and the rules that we have to follow now is really the best way. It doesn't really help it doesn't really help our client stress level or either anxiety about buying or selling if we're talking about how, I mean, this was all for no reason and nothing had ever really changed.
Mhm.
Well, you know, going back to being a professional at the very beginning. And avoiding the lawsuit, you know, people in America, they hate lawyers even more than they hate realtors. So.
We're close second.
Yeah, we're 1 second.
Yeah.
So I think again, bringing up the evil lawyer at the beginning and smacking them down and say, look, nothing has changed, but this happened. So they've basically changed the flow chart and they've added some forms and let me explain the forms. And this is how it's gonna work going forward. I like a lot of this stuff here, almost all of it. Jacob, but I think leaving out the thing that, hey, Mr. Buyer, Mr. Seller, nothing has changed, just the flow chart has changed. And there's these forms here that are now part of the flow chart.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
How soon into your process do you bring up the forms? Do you do it on the initial call with seller and buyer?
These are all happening. So this is happening once I get through. So on the listing side, I'm giving my listing presentation. They've decided on the price. They're going to work with me and we're going to go through the paperwork now. So this is the end part. Same thing with the buyer. Now that you understand how we work together in home services, here's the next step. We need to contractually obligate to each other. So those are both happening for me at the very end. Yeah.
Okay, so you schedule the appointment first and then bring up the form.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in there's too much to cover on the phone. If someone straight point blank asks me, hey, you know what? That's a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up because there has been a lot of changes. We'll go over that when we get together and meet.
Okay.
And there's multiple reasons I do that. One is I want to meet with them because what I know is that 76% of buyers and sellers will contract and work with the first agent they meet, right? So I'm always trying to get into the house. And two, you talk about confusing 30 seconds over the phone with stats or with mortgage rate stuff or mortgage programs, you lose them. They're gone.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
Jake, how do you handle the when you're taking the listing and the part where you're saying if you were to double end it, how are you handling that part?
It's a good question. I am not a fan of double ending. I've never been, even before these changes. Typically for me, and I've done it probably about a dozen times. Typically, what I tell them is I say, hey, here's the situation is there is sometimes a buyer will come straight to us and straight to me as the listing agent. Here's the thing is I don't love doing that. And here's why, because you don't get true representation, right? Instead of being able to answer your question in a paragraph, I'm now only able to answer it in a sentence. Here's what I'll do instead. I'll actually won't turn the buyer away, but I'll have them work with someone on my team or in my office. Is that fair? Yep. Cool. And if you guys do that, typically I would just put the same concession commission. I mean, that's what I would do. As they're charging on the list side of things.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For buyers that are not used to paying any compensation to the buyer agent, how would you explain to them how things are changing? And because in Spain we don't have what you have, things are very different. And there's certain areas where you do get paid by both sides, 3% each side. But there are others, like where I live, normally it's the seller who pays the fees. And now things are changing, and I'm trying to get the buyers to understand that if I work with it, instead of running around showing them houses, after they choose 4 or 5 houses, I want them to decide on one thing, but I want to do it knowing that I'm going to get a commission.
Yeah.
How would I do that?
So I just want to make sure I fully understand the question. So instead of you want them to sign something with you
I want to sign the buyer agreement
prior to showing a bunch of houses, right?
before, yes, and they're not used to, because they know that most agents here, well, just about almost every agent in this area do not do that.
So most agents just run around and show a ton of houses.
Yeah, and they would get paid by the seller only. And this is what another thing that some of the listing agents, they have a commission. It could be a 3%, it could be a 4%, a 5%, but they can choose also whether to pay you half of it or nothing. And so I just want to make sure that if I go show any house, whether it's mine or anybody else's, that I do get paid some money, and explain to the buyers that to sign the at least the commission for me, the agreement for me. to work for them.
So basically the way it works in your area is how we were a month ago. Is that kind of how?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
So even back before then, right? So here's my thing. I've always been a buyer broker. Well, let me back that phrase up. I probably for the last year, 2 years, and it was since I got burned. I've gotten burned a few times where I've spent a lot of time, and then they're like, we got into contract. The seller said that we would only get into contract. We worked with the agent, but right. And so what I typically do is I will get them out, and I had a one free home rule. I'd show them a house because my goal is to get there and build some rapport and talk to them. And then I would set up a meeting, right? And set up a buyer consultation. And then at that point, I would essentially say, hey, before we move forward, the next step is to agree to work with each other. And here's how that looks. And I would go through the buyer broker agreement with them and say, hey, I do things a lot differently, right? Because we do, like, if I have a buyer and there's no homes on the market and they're looking in certain areas, we're calling into that area. We're potentially sending mailers into that area. We're doing door knocking into that area. I mean, and I'm going to put work into helping and try and find a buyer. And we've had plenty of buyers that we've helped where we had an off-market property that hadn't gone to market yet, and we connected them there. I have a lot of relationships in the real estate space, so I've connected a lot of dots many times. And before I put my effort into there and put my time and energy, I expect some type of return. And I just go through a buyer broker consultation, and they say, hey, and I just say the next steps, now that you understand the services we provide, the next steps is just for you to commit to me and me to commit to you fully.
Lucy,
And sometimes I have, most of my clients, my buyers are from other European countries. So before they get here, they plan like with a month or month and a half ahead of time to their trip to come to Spain and to see different houses. So I would have to have a meeting with them, maybe on Zoom, and then do this before they get here.
Ever since the pandemic, one thing that's been awesome since the COVID thing is like a lot of my buyer consultations I do on Zoom. I do them all the time on Zoom.
Okay.
and Lucy, you do have to have a
Yes.
buyer representation agreement signed before you show any property to any client.
She's in Spain.
Well, I'm in Spain,
Oh,
so
okay.
normally
Well, maybe
here,
we'll visit you.
yeah, yeah, okay. Well, normally in Spain things are very different because we're the only for the last year in my area, in the Valencia area, all the cities here, we have to have a license to be able to sell real estate. For the last year. Before, nobody needed to have a license to sell. Anybody could come from anywhere around the world, come to Spain, whether they were a plumber, a painter, or hairdresser, or anything, and they would say, I'm just going to sell real estate because I woke up this morning and I decided I'm going to do something different. And they can start selling houses. You just need to have contacts, talk to people, and, one of them says, even the hairdresser, I have a friend that's a hairdresser, and she has clients that want to buy or sell a house. So she says that she's a hairdresser because that's what she does, but she has no knowledge of anything. She just knows how to open a door. She doesn't know what a reservation is. She doesn't even know how to fill out the document or do anything. And she calls herself a real estate agent. She advertised herself as a real estate agent as well, as a hairdresser and a bunch of other things. But this is Spain.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Here's a couple tips that I'll give, and on this whole thing is in these conversation pieces and the way that they're set up. And some are going to disagree, some will understand, but I think every one of us have a value that we bring to our clients, right? And I know my value. I know how I work. I know the protection I give my clients. I know how I find them homes. I know what we do. And one of the things in this buyer consultation or this conversation is at the end, I put at the end and I say, I'm a reasonable business person. If for some reason there's a gap, a small gap and we weren't able to come, we're gonna make sure that we go ahead and we'll have that conversation at that point, but we'll make sure that this works. I've heard, and I don't know if I should be saying this, so cut me off, Michelle, if that's the fact. I heard people say, oh, well, I'll do whatever it takes. Hey, that's great. I love it. So there's going to be agents that go down that path. And at the same time, I think we deserve a professional fee. We deserve what we, what a fee that you determine, right? And that's why I have the conversation of, hey, if there's different options, if you can't afford that, and we run into a situation, and I think it's just having those expectations up front and having that conversation so that you don't wake up in year from now, and then all of a sudden you're doing way more work and you're barely able to provide for your family, right? So I think we have to be able to say, hey, here's how we work. This is what it is. And if this is the case, there may be a situation where maybe this isn't the right house for you, or there's you cover a certain portion or something of that nature. I just want to make sure that you guys have that piece and be able to show your value. Some of the things that we use to really show value is just last week, we got out of contract on a listing that we had where the buyer's agent, no communication, nothing. The lender who they were pre-approved with, no communication, nothing. And it ended up, I actually got in touch with the president of that mortgage company. It was a top 5 mortgage company. I just started Googling emails, got in touch with the guy. He got me in touch with someone else. That file hadn't even been submitted to underwriting, and they've already released all their contingencies, the buyer themselves. So I know the difference in how I operate versus what some agents are going to operate out in that space. And so my whole thought is I have a value attached, and I want people working with me instead of working with someone who's not going to care about them, right?
That's great.
What other questions or comments that you guys have?
Anything you want to role play in particular, you guys?
Yeah, just throw them at me.
That's coming up, or has happened out there?
Throw me an objection.
Yeah, give us I like that.
Actually, I have a friend up in Washington who called me looking for houses up there. And she asked me for a little advice, I said, well, one of the things I told her, well, you're gonna have to sign a buyer broker agreement. I don't know, it's exactly the same in Washington, but this is the way it works in California. And, I've known her for a long time, she trusts me 100%. She says, oh, I gotta sign something before. I said, yes, it may be slightly different in Washington, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be very closely the same. And she said, what if I don't like the guy? I said, well, you probably can ask for a clause, unilateral, either party, you or the agent, could cancel the buyer contract. Add that to the contract. I haven't asked Bruce, our broker here, about that idea, but I meant to. Yes, Michelle?
Yes, most definitely.
Here's what
that's an objection I think you're gonna get with buyers. This woman, 100% trusts me. She's already objected to this thing that may not even happen.
Yeah. I think with that, there's a couple options for you, right? You have the touring agreement where, hey, let's set up a touring agreement, right? And if we'll go see 3 homes, this is only applicable to the 3 homes, and see if we're a good match, right? So it's kind of a trial basis instead of committing to a 3-month process. The other piece too is I've used this for years, and because we have a guaranteed sale clause within our listing presentation, and the way that used to work and still works is we have a period of time, usually by default 6 months worth of time period to sell the house. And I would just say, look, here's the thing, is if I'm not going to tie you to a contract, okay, if I'm not living up to what I told you I would do, first thing is I'd want to have you sit down and let's have a conversation. If we can't solve it, then we'll kill the agreement. Now, here's the thing. And then they say, well, what if you try and hold me that? Well, what good is that going to do me? And what good is that going to do you? If you don't want to work with me, you're probably not going to allow any showings to come into your house, right? You're not going to cooperate with me as a listing agent. So it's just going to be a big waste of time for everyone. So yeah, if you don't like what we are doing and I haven't earned what I said, then we'll go ahead and cancel the contract. I'll even put it in there. Same thing you could do with buyers is if we're not a fit, hey, you know what? I mean, think about trying to tell the buyer that doesn't like you, trying to show them houses. That's not going to work out very well, right? They're not going to return your texts. They're not going to return your calls. Like, hey, let's go see this house at Rancho. Hello, right? So. Good comment though. The touring agreement, I think, is a good solution for that. That's why I think well, do they call it a touring agreement or is it, what's it exactly called? Do you know?
It's the PSRA.
PSRA. All right. I'm thinking of touring agreement because Zillow came out with something like that or something. What other questions you running into? What other thoughts do you have?
Question. So would you prefer that agreement, what Barbara said? Would you do that agreement with like people that you just barely met, or would you push more for the buyer's representation agreement?
Me personally, I would go for the representation agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd go through my whole listing consultation, right? I would have that conversation with them. And as I'm going through my listing or my pre-listing or I'm thinking of listings because the listing consultation, as I'm going through my buyer consultation, I'm setting in trial closes throughout there. So there's like an art to giving the buyer consultation too, right? One of our pages is how do we find them homes, right? How do we negotiate on their behalf? And as I'm finishing up pages and conversations, I'm asking them all the way through this conversation with them. Does this seem like a plan that would work for you? Yes. Okay, cool. Does this seem like a plan that would work for you, the way we negotiate and really focus on our clients? Yes. Awesome. So if they try to push back on that buyer representation agreement, I'm just straight up. I say, hey, I'm a little confused here. You know, we talked through the buyer consultation. You said, yes, this works. Yes, this worked. Usually when someone doesn't want to work exclusively with me, there's some type of objection I haven't answered or a question you might have. So what are those? And then flush them and then go back into for the close.
Got it. That helps. Thank
The buyer rep now is just the same as a listing presentation, really. You got to have a ton of value. You got to be able to show your value, right? You've got to, I think the biggest thing you can do is learn each other's stories, right? So what do I mean by that? Stories are the most powerful evidence of proof, okay? We have a ton of stories like that one I just gave you about the disaster of the buyer agent and how I wouldn't want them to fall into something like that. Another story we have, we took all of our closings for the last 12 months, added up all the fees we negotiated, all the price reductions, repairs, closing costs, and it came out to over $250,000 we negotiated on a per client basis. It was about $7,600. So that's a huge amount of value that we're adding for those people, right? And of course, we have our disclaimer. This is not everyone has the same circumstance, but they're starting to see, here's our negotiation. And those are real numbers. I can pull up a spreadsheet for them, right? Having that, showing them our off-market property listings, ones that haven't gone to market yet, that they would be open to offer if it made sense for them, right? That's a huge benefit. Telling the story of how you saved someone $10,000 or you took someone to a new home builder and negotiated $100,000 off the price. That's a huge story. We have those stories. Connect with people in the market center, learn about their stories and turn it from an I to a we, because we're a Keller Williams community, right? We're all getting the same training. We're all working and really hard for our people. So use that we and be able to tell stories for every objection, right? And get really good at your scripts and conversations, objection handling. I think there'll be a lot of resistance, right? We call those resistance as objections. And it's good. 2020, 2021, 2022, the resistance went away because rates were so low. So now we have to re-up on our resistance training, and rather than focus on the resistance, focus on the opportunity with people, right? Why are they moving there? What has them going out to Natomas? It gets them closer to their grandparents. It gets them into a situation where they're not getting evicted anymore. Whatever that is, focus on the opportunity instead of the resistance. And if you just, this is the way it is, because it really is, and this is the fee I charge. Yeah, will there be discounts? Maybe, probably, right? Who knows? Maybe there's a model that comes out where people are getting paid by the hour. I don't know. But I know that I provide a massive amount of value. I can explain that, articulate that to someone, and show them proof. And so smart people will understand that, right? Smart people will understand the value you bring.
What do you
What
guys
other-
think?
What other questions? Patrick, you got one more for me. Let's hear it.
Oh, let's see.
How long have you been doing this?
18 years.
18 years. Nice, dude. We're almost twinsies. I've been 22.
Where do you find information on off-market listings?
Sorry,
We're
what was
talking
that?
about
That's a good question. Who was that? Ryan?
Ryan. Yeah, Ryan Mason.
Um,
Can you repeat the question, Jacob?
yeah, he said, where do you find information about an off-market listing? So what I would say is in the circle group in the message board. I'm sure maybe I don't know if they announce their off markets or their coming soons or things like that. I personally, our group right now, I think we've got about 12 listings signed, and then plus we're with a bigger group in the area where we have probably 20 to 30. So we always have off market opportunities. And we just keep them, we tell the people about them. Hey, if you got a buyer, if you got this, right? We have some properties coming to market. What I would do is go into, so let's say, give me an example. So let me do this. So Ryan, let's say you have a buyer, right? Looking in Natomas. What I would do is I would go into MetroList. I would go to closed listings over the last year. I would put the zip code of Natomas in there. And I would put the listing and just see who the majority of the listings were held by. And I'd call that agent and say, hey, I see you do a lot of business out here listing wise out here in the Natomas office or Natomas area. You guys have any off market listings coming soon? And I just create a list of top 5 or 10s in different areas and create relationships, build relationships. I might have a buyer for you and see if they have anything coming down the pipe. A lot of people in the market center, I guarantee probably have, go to the bigger teams. They probably have listings, but that's one thing I might do is figure out who has a majority of the market share, because chances are they have a signed listing that hasn't hit the market yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would definitely use the Circle app as a resource. Put questions in there, and you should get some kind of response. We all monitor it as leadership, so if it doesn't get a response, I typically will tag somebody, and they may or may not like that, but I do.
The
All right.
other thing, Ryan, is if you want off markets, every house that's canceled, expired, or withdrawn are off market opportunities. Call up those owners. I do that all the time. I go and I'll look into the area that I'm looking in and just find their information and call them up and just say, hey, saw your home that came off the market. Looks like it could be a match for one of my buyers. Are you guys still interested in selling?
Yeah, we just got a commercial listing that way in our new commercial classes that we're putting on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They did, one of the agents actually called the expireds over in Lodi and got a farm. Pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm. So like we use a system called Mojo. It's a dialing system. And I have all the expireds. Gosh, I don't know how long I've been calling expireds, but I just click in there and I'm like, hey, I'm looking in Folsom, and then a whole list of homes that didn't sell. And I mean, I just call them up. Hey, you looking to sell? Are you still interested? And
Mojo
That's-
has the phone numbers.
Mojo has the phone numbers of they do have expired data. So yes, Mojo does have expired data. I use Mojo Sells, plus we own Land Voice. So it's another expired data place. The big three are Vulcan, Land Voice, and RedX. So we get a lot of information in there, and we have a ton of data in there. So, but yes, if you Mojo dialer, you can buy expired data from them. I think you can buy old expired data, things like that too. Mhm.
You're right, you can also drive around looking for lawns that have not been cut or roofs that look kind of
Smart.
crappy. Or go by, those outpatient clinics and look for the guys coming out with forks in their arms and using walkers. They're gonna sell their house soon.
Also, go on to Zillow, look at all the rental properties that have been on there for a while and say, hey, call them up and just say, hey, look, if it's or a for sale by owner, or if it's a for rent by owner, call them up, say, hey, have you considered selling? I might have someone. The other thing is for let's see, Ryan, are you newer?
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay. One of my favorite places to dig for listings is non-owner occupant properties. So I have my title guy run a list of non-owner occupant properties with non-corporations, people who own 2 or more houses. I then send it to my data guy, and you can find a data guy, could give you a resource, have them pull the phone numbers. I start calling those people, and the reason I like those so much is they're very simple because they're very numbers driven. So my conversation with them goes, hey, Ryan, this is Jake. I'm a local real estate broker here in the area. I'm hoping I got the owner of 123 Main. Yeah, that's us. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Hey, a lot of our investor clients with the current environment in California are looking at exit strategies. Have you considered selling if it made sense? And if it makes sense, it's an easy conversation and they're not tied to the property emotionally. Those are probably your best listing opportunities as well. So
Okay, you said non-owner occupied on Metro List you were looking?
no, get your title guy to pull the list of what they call it, absentee owners,
Oh, okay.
and put some parameters around it of non-corporations. So you don't want to get like what's that company called? There's some big companies that own a lot of properties, and people that own 2 or more is usually where I'd put it. And they'll give you a list of properties, and you just send them to a data guy to have them scrape it. And if you need a resource for that, I got you. It's not that expensive.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also encourage you to be a part of Seller Search tomorrow. That's gonna be a huge class. This is a coach, a maps coach, a bold coach. He sold already over 6,000 listings. I mean, if you're looking for listings, I would want to learn from somebody like that. We're actually bringing them in from another area, so I would highly recommend it. And then also at 11 o'clock, we have another bold coach, maps coach, going over different aspects of the market on how to get more production.
Okay.
All these changes are cool because it's an opportunity. As long as you really focus on learning the things and learning how to have good conversations with people, 6 months from now, we're gonna look back. It's kind of like when I was in mortgage and they changed everything after the market crashed in 08. You look back now and it's like, why were we worried, right? But all the people who worry too much, instead of just charging at it, they're gonna get stuck. Just go after it. And at the end of the day, our job's to serve home buyers and serve homeowners, and just focus on that and you'll be fine.
And keep in mind, it's probably gonna change again and again and again.
Probably 2 weeks from now, then another 2 weeks. Gosh, they already had a change. They took the boxes out of Metro List where you could put if the seller was considering concessions. Remember that? They just changed that in Metro List.
You just gotta be able to learn how to pivot. over and over and over. I used to call it riding the wave, now because it sounds even better, so. Yes, all right, Jake, appreciate your time. You are one busy man, always in the top 10, and we appreciate you, so thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
I'm just trying to keep up with everyone. That's all.
If
See
we
you
want,
later.
now's the time to, make sure you get Jake in your pocket and say, Jake, can you do this? Can you do that? Maybe he might be willing to do it again of some sort, so. We'll
Jake,
definitely talk again.
Will you send out will someone send out your fun,
I'll send it. I'll
Okay.
print it. I'll print it and send it.
Okay.
Can I send it to Alicia?
Yes,
Sweet.
we'll send it, we'll put it on Circle probably. And then also there was some scripts that we got from another coach. I'll send that out as well.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
No, this one's $25.
Yes, yeah.